So thank you everyone for being here. My name is Anissa Avon, and I want to welcome you to our Building Success Through Resiliency. This is part 2, the 10 dimensions of positive leadership and how to build resilience on the road to success. So very excited about this topic today. Our part 1 is available for download on the website. At the end of this, we'll make sure that you have a link to that, as well as we'll be sending out a link to in the next couple of days to download the content and materials and the audio recording for part 2. So I want to make a quick mention of the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. The Whitmarsh Consulting Group is an HR consultancy firm that does a lot of work for in partnership with Turnkey Coaching and Development Solution, and they make our webinars possible. If you have joined us today and you have any specific question or specific desire that you'd like to make sure that we address today and to be meaningful and relevant for you. And in fact, that is why the Whitmarsh Consulting Group works with us. They serve the HR market, and they have partnered with us to provide relevant HR, leadership development, employee development solutions and webinars. And if we're doing our job, then your questions will be answered today. So thank you, Miriam. I want to say hello. She says hello from Bristol. If you're on the webinar today, that means you're taking time out of your precious day to spend with us. So say hello, tell us where you're from, and how we can make sure today is a resounding success for you. So let's get moving. I want to introduce a little bit about Turnkey. My name is Anissa Avon, and our company, Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions, was founded in 2004. We have a pretty fantastic team of executive coaches, organizational development experts, and trainers all around the globe, and in key hubs, of course, throughout the U.S. and key hubs globally as well. Our services include level and budget appropriate coaching programs from the C-suite all the way down to performance improvement and frontline. We have over 400 topics in our off-the-shelf programs, as well as we do customized content and training programs. One of the things that we're most proud of is our high potential development programs and comprehensive leadership university and succession planning components, either from A to Z support or augmenting internal programs. We also have a variety of assessments. Pretty much any assessment over 200 we have access to, and we can make recommendations if you're already using assessments with your programs. We also do engagement HR culture surveys, strategic planning, OD consulting, and of course business simulation through our capstone project, aka Shark Tank Business Acumen program. So at the end of today, we will be inviting you to reach out if we may be supporting you, if there's some way we can support you, I should say. And now I want to introduce you to our expert master trainer, Kimberly Putman. Kimberly has a really unique background, and she's an executive coach and master trainer who specializes in working with both C-suite executives and senior level managers and even high potentials who would benefit from leadership development, leadership effectiveness, and specifically one of her key areas of expertise is around building resiliency, building a long-time or a longer-term strategy of building competency within leaders. She works in a number of industries and has done many, many different training programs, including team development and team restructuring, corporate culture work, mission, vision, values work. A lot of her clients hire her because she is able to help them balance both their personal and professional goals with the organizational goals. She draws from over 20 years of coaching and entrepreneurial experience and is a facilitation and training specialist. What did I miss there, Kimberly? What makes you an expert on today's topic?
Wow. I would say having been steeping in leadership development for almost 20 years, from my own experience in terms of entrepreneurship through my own leadership growth, and then deciding, because I had started out as such a terrible boss and terrible leader, that it was a passion for me to learn and grow myself. But then as I started down that road, I became incredibly passionate about the concept of coaching and ended up transitioning my business into one that really focuses on exactly what you just said, that executive coaching, the training, development, facilitation. And I always like to say I bring a unique lens to my coaching because I also do a lot of work with ADHD clients, whether they're high potential high school students to college students and adults, and having that specific lens to use in executive coaching, whether or not a client has ADHD, does end up helping with a lot of systems and processes and strategies for maximizing people's potential.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And today we're going to specifically bring forth some of your expertise and experience on building resiliency and the 10 dimensions of leadership. So if you're ready, please get us rolling. What are we going to learn today?
Well, I want to remind everybody that this is part two of part one and two. And so the webinar outcomes today are as you see on this particular slide. And I'm going to go over them again because they do apply to part two as well as part one. So I want to talk about the importance of resiliency in leadership and how building resilience really does create a path to greater success. Secondarily, I want you to have an understanding of what the positive leadership model is. And hopefully I'll have a few minutes in the beginning to just remind you about what that is, even though we did go over that in part one. And then the last one is a quick review of all of the 10 dimensions, focusing in on the last four that we did not get to in part one.
Perfect. And one of the key interesting aspects of this webinar is it really did focus a lot on resilience. When you and I first started talking about what's the purpose of our webinar, why would someone join us for an hour, what are they going to get out of it, you really helped me understand why the slant of this, the competencies of really effective and positive leadership include this concept of resilience. Share with us again, what's your perspective on that? Why is that a key competency in effective leadership?
In today's world, change is happening at just a completely rapid rate. And our customers are gathering data by the truckloads, and they are expecting to have results immediately. And so the ability to adapt to change, and whether it's positive or negative, is incredibly important, because being able to adapt is being able to respond. And that is going to be the key to the success of your business. And of course, as a leader, being able to demonstrate resilience and teach that and pull it through your organization is key.
Very good. That really speaks to some other leadership lexicon that we use a lot, like emotional intelligence, social intelligence, the ability to manage and motivate a team. So what I understand you're sharing with us is leaders want and must develop resiliency, but that is also something that they're going to want to be able to cascade through the team in order to have productive conflict and healthy relations.
Right, absolutely. And so, the positive leadership model is about amplifying what is working well and shoring that up, as opposed to focusing on what is not working well and fixing that. And there are some key elements to positive leadership in terms of, personality or maybe even character strength qualities. And one of those is resilience. Another one is emotional.
Kimberly, I want to interrupt you just momentarily. We have some feedback that perhaps they're not able to hear you as well as they would like. If perhaps you can raise your volume or adjust your microphone, I think that would help.
Okay. Is that better?
It is. Even just your adjusting your volume just like you just did, I think will be okay. Jim and other folks on the call, if you would like Kimberly throughout to adjust, just ping us and I'll let Kimberly know the feedback.
Great. Thank you so much for letting me know. Okay. And hopefully that sound is a little bit better. So what I was saying was that the baseline characteristics that you're going to want to develop in positive leadership when working on amplifying the positive is going to be that resilience, your personal emotional intelligence, and your personal executive presence. Those are sort of the foundational qualities of a positive leader that, what we've been talking about in terms of the 10 dimensions will really help you develop that positive leadership skill set.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And if you would share with us, there were 10 dimensions of a positive leader. And in part one, we went through number 1 through 5. And in today, we're going to go through 6 through 10. But if you'll just bring us all back up to speed about those 10 dimensions again.
Absolutely. So I consider the 10 dimensions the baseline of, or the framework with which I want you to think about positive leadership, at least in the human capital side of leadership, right? We always think about operations and human capital, and this particular set of dimensions is really focused on the human capital side. So the first one really has to do with framing your mission, vision, company culture, business strategy, and then ultimately using those to model the way towards your goals. The second one that we discussed was the development and the management of your systems and processes, which is sometimes an operations discussion, but because thoughtful systems and processes really help your human capital perform better, I wanted to include that. The next one was about setting expectations, priorities, and providing direction and guidance. And one of the things that's really important about that is, besides being incredibly clear with your verbiage, a positive leader is all about creating a positive relationship. Because you can use all the clear language that you want, but if the relationship with your staff is not positive and strong, your setting of expectations, priorities, and providing direction and guidance is just not going to be as strong. So number 4 that we went through was delegating work and decisions, and that had to do with empowering your staff as well as understanding the difference between just delegating and what sharing responsibility really looks like. The next one we talked about was communication, and that was a pretty in-depth discussion. We had part 1 and part 2, but that brings us where we left off, which was starting with number 6, which is influencing through positive impact. So if you're a positive leader and you've built your resilience, your emotional intelligence, and your executive presence, your ability to influence through positive impact is going to be much stronger. As we move through and move on to number 7, we have the idea of cultivating that executive presence so that you can positively impact the organization. And because executive presence is such a hip term in leadership these days, I really wanted to give people an opportunity to get a sense of what that really is. Dimension number 8 is about building and maintaining relationships, business relationships for sure, in a trusting, safe, and equitable environment for everyone, whether that's your stakeholders, your clients, your staff, and of course, yourself. Number 9 has to do with employee development and retention. What do employees want, and how are you going to keep them? And then number 10 is sort of the overarching theme for how you develop as a positive leader, which is personal development. How are you going to use all of your inner work to develop as a leader in terms of both your leadership skills and those foundational qualities of resilience or resiliency, emotional intelligence, and executive presence?
Excellent, excellent. So I'd really like to hear from the folks that are on the call. Give us your feedback. What do you see as the 3 most important characteristics of an effective leader? Now, I'm going to launch a poll. And Kimberly, in your experience with executive coaching and all of the training that you've done towards employee development and leadership effectiveness, what would you say are the most common traits that really great leaders? I mean, if you had to drill it down to the top 3, what are those?
I would say it's a tie between emotional intelligence and integrity. Those 2 at the top. And then probably confidence balanced with humility. I think
Hmm.
those are the 3 that I see across the board in terms of success that are the most important, because you can have short stints of positive results with a lot of the others, but to have lasting results, I think that you really do need those qualities.
Well, do you think, in terms of now, the bottom line is, if a good leader doesn't have financial acumen, they're only going to be able to lead so far, right? If a good leader doesn't have the ability to have a sense of urgency or to drive for results, they're only going to be able to lead the team so far. We've all met leaders who might be high integrity and have a great vision, but then they don't keep their eyes on the basics of the business. What is it that makes these softer skills even more important than profitability, for example?
I think that some of the other skills can be, in a sense, outsourced, right? So if you know that your skill set is really around the human capital management, and you have a vision and mission and a strategy, and you can outline all of the things that are going to help guide the business on the more, quote, harder skills, it's really important to be able to build a team that can help you fill the gaps, right? We're not focusing on your weaknesses necessarily, but there are always going to be harder skills or technical skills where you just aren't as strong. And so
Very good.
I know we could probably argue back and forth with lots of different people, but I would say that, you've got to have the soft skills.
Well, and I think that what you're sharing, I think you guys can see now the poll results on your screen. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, good, because it's not on my screen quite the same. I think that what you're sharing is accurate. There's also an assumption that if you're a leader, you're going to have to learn to develop certain business acumen basics. The unfortunate piece is oftentimes the business acumen, the financial acumen, the critical thinking skills are assumed that a leader has arrived at a certain level, and they therefore already have those characteristics. But what I'm hearing from you is, even if they don't, they can surround themselves with a team to support them in those other pieces. Whereas there are certain soft skills that if a leader wants to get work done through others, there are just some things that can't be outsourced. Integrity is one of them. Emotional intelligence is another one of them. And if we're looking at the results of our poll, I think that it's clear that 90% of us agree integrity is one of the top most important characteristics, followed by emotional intelligence and vision. So thank you, everyone, for participating. It's always interesting to see where we all fall on what we believe is the most valuable characteristic. So, Kimberly, dimension number 6, we're ready.
Okay, well, and I want to apologize for the background noise. Apparently, my upstairs neighbor has decided that they're going to put in floors today. So that has started after lunch, and I apologize for any noise that you're hearing. Okay, so dimension number 6 really has to do with how can you influence the organization in a positive way. And we can all come up with leaders, or whether they are real and experienced or people that we've seen on TV, that are incredibly inspiring. And people that are inspiring really know how to customize that impact on individual people. They know what it is that motivates or inspires different types of people. And they're able to use that focus on the why, the context, or that's what I often call it, the context of why we're doing what we're doing, as opposed to just starting with a direction which says, go do this, with absolutely no context or tie to the mission and vision. So to me, that is the key, being able to be inspiring and tie what it is that people are doing on a daily basis to the bigger mission and vision of the organization, as well as just even a small context as to why a decision was made and why a direction is being given. Also being inspiring or utilizing, leveraging what I often call as office politics, and not the kind of office politics that is gossiping at the water cooler, but the kind of office politics that allows people to utilize the networks that are already developing in your business. Sometimes that has to do with people that we call influencers, those that are really in the know in your organization, that are well thought of, well respected. They could be at any level in your organization, but they tend to be a hub. And a great leader can identify who those hubs are and leverage them to manage change, to test ideas, to spread positivity. They can use those individuals and the networking that those people have already created to move the dial in the organization. You can also look for people that are champions, those that are actively helping other people in the organization grow. Sometimes they're inside the organization, those champions, and other times they are outside of the organization, but their focus is on helping others ascend in organizations. And sometimes being able to leverage those people can also help you grow. It might be because you're tapping into what they know about those individuals that you don't know, or it might just be about utilizing them to help grow the team. And I also think mentoring, whether or not you have an internal formal program or you encourage your employees to tap into external mentors, but having a culture of, or a mentoring culture where we talk lots and lots about how is it that a particular person did something and was successful? How might that translate to how individuals within the organization can use that? And I think positive leaders can really tap into that. And I think thinking about how you could have a formal or informal mentoring program within your organization really can move the dial.
You know, I love that you're bringing this up here in our, we oftentimes will do this in our Leadership University programs, but also any program that requires an element of change management. If you're in HR, you know that a singular training or a singular coaching session typically isn't going to move the needle. In fact, as human beings, we don't like change. And so even if we invest a lot of money in our education, only about, I think the statistic is like 17 to 20% of that do we actually retain. And, you know, 17% is better than we were before we had the education. But nevertheless, the only way to retain and integrate that is to follow up that training or that coaching with some kind of ongoing accountability. That can be mentoring, it can be group coaching, but one of the things that I love to help our clients do is to create an ambassador program. Some folks call it, others call it, we call it champions of change. And it's when you implement anything that you have an intention of changing the culture, you allow folks to self-select and self-apply. And there's just certain criteria. You have to have a positive attitude. You have to be willing to put in a little bit of extra time. You have to be willing to meet once a month, with the entire goal being how can we support our organization in achieving success and cultivating a more positive work environment. And these can be frontline folks, they can be hourly folks, or they can be the CEO, but it's a group of typically no more than, say, 10% of the organization whose entire job is to be champions for positivity and champions for changing the culture to be a great place to work.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, that the concept of change management and using the power of the people already in the organization to manage that change is huge. And the last piece of that influencing part also has to do with looking at, you know, what do we say we believe, or what do we say are our policies, and what's the difference between those policies and the actual practice. So if
Right.
we, you know, if we say we believe in work-life balance, but we're constantly texting, emailing, calling, or requiring people to stay until 6:30 and 7 at night, there's a huge gap between our policy and our practice.
Yeah.
And that does not drive positive impact, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I like to include Oprah as someone who inspires through a positive impact is that she does one of those, she connects with people on their individual level. So she customizes her interaction to the person that she's working with. And I think that really helps people feel seen and heard, and really does move the needle in terms of positivity. So that brings us to dimension number 7, and this really has to do with that hip term again, executive presence, which is a little bit tough to get into one definition because it is somewhat of an intuitive feeling. When you see it, you know it. When you hear it, when you are being inspired by someone with strong executive presence, there is something about that that you can not only, hear and see, but you can almost feel it in your body that this person has such an impact that it is certainly, as the definition says, this person has the blending of temperament, the competencies, sometimes it's business savvy and skills that when put together give you all of the right leadership signals that says, this person has nailed it. And so it's really important to kind of think through how you cultivate executive presence. I'm curious to know what it is that audience members have done in terms of removing blind spots and learning about, how are they perceived, because that's often what executive presence is. But as you think through, how can I improve on my executive presence, the first is to think about your emotional intelligence. And in order to really learn about yourself, you have to be prepared to receive feedback. And that often means you need to invite it, because if you're a leader, it may not be that the people that work for you or work with you are willing to give you the kind of feedback that would be really helpful for you to receive. And so I encourage everybody, and certainly the coaching process encourages everyone to start to solicit the kind of feedback that will let you know, where are you in terms of your emotional intelligence. I see a quick question. Let me go back and define executive presence again. It is the blending of temperament, competencies, and skills that when combined send all of the right leadership signals. So
You
another...
are right about that being a very ambiguous thing,
It is.
or unclear. And something that you mentioned earlier about identifying your blind spots. Well, most of us don't know how to identify our blind spots because they're blind spots, right? Thus, the very name. In particularly, we have found that and I'm only going to speak to women executives at this moment because I happen to be one. So I understand this particular challenge. Executive presence is not something that is natural for many women that have been raised not to draw too much attention, not to hurt other people's feelings, not to be overly direct, not to be the smartest person in the room. And I could go on and on with that list. But it is, in fact, one of the very most important competencies that a female leader can cultivate and must learn to cultivate in order to have authority and be respected at the head of the table, or even as a seat in the table. We have worked with a number of female executives who consistently felt like they weren't heard, or that they didn't get the credibility or the recognition that they deserved. And once we started working with them specifically on can you effectively express passion and energy without becoming the B word, for example, or can you display confidence and positivity? Can you be courageous? Are you adaptable? Do you have the emotional intelligence? Once we started really cultivating those things, suddenly their position in their organization really did change. So this is something that's a little bit hard to put your fingers on, but there are some really great books specifically about cultivating executive presence. And I have found those to be amazing at just opening a person's eyes to what is that charisma? What does that mean, executive presence?
I think that's it is incredibly important. And I think when people ask me about, why coaching, I can read, I can watch videos, I can listen to podcasts, all of these different things. And one of the things I do think is great is being able to read those books on executive presence, so you can learn what the elements are, but the reality is, and especially for women, as you were saying, because of these cultural norms that we have, it's incredibly important to leverage coaching to help you do that in an authentic way, right? Because we all know the idea of what being courageous looks like, but how you display that is incredibly personal. And being able to do that authentically is what's going to make the difference as a woman, for sure, in whether or not you are taken seriously and you can move the needle on your own career.
Great.
So some of the other elements that come into developing executive presence has to do with having poise, particularly when things are challenging. What happens to your behavior under pressure when you are stressed, when the organization is stressed, when you are faced with someone who is stressed? Can you remain poised? Can you take a breath and be unrushed? Do you know how to bring things back to a more straightforward atmosphere so that people can really communicate with you regardless of what's happening in the environment? One of the ones that is sometimes tricky is, what does decisive look like? And how are you perceived in terms of your ability to be decisive? A lot of leaders that are very charismatic also tend to be a little bit more democratic in their leadership style. And sometimes that ends up making them seem like they are not decisive. And so I think that's something, again, that you can use coaching, you can use feedback, you can use all types of information to get a sense of what your reputation is around being decisive and work on how you are perceived in that area. Problem solving and your ability to think through things analytically and in innovative ways is another part of executive presence. And then the one that I really like is, of course, making sure that your appearance is professionally relevant, appropriate, but also, again, really, cruising along with lots of little things happening in the universe. And that's kind of what we want to think about in terms of our leaders. They are steering the ship, and we need to know that they are calm, cool, collected, energized, positive, and ready to lead the organization through whatever is going on. So Anissa and I had some pretty good discussions around dimension number 8, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Turnkey has a ton of information that is really current, excellent, and what's the best way to say it? I guess easy to absorb. And so I highly encourage anybody that's participating in this webinar to go to the Turnkey website and look at the resources that are available on this topic. So much has changed in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that learning about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what it means to your human capital, and honestly what it means to your bottom line, is really, really important. Knowing what exactly is diversity, understanding what the term equity means, and understanding inclusion. So I want to pause for a minute because I think Anissa has quite a bit that she can offer to this, and just want to give her a second to.
Well, I think that the biggest challenge that many organizations are facing right now is that what worked even a year ago is not working now. We have seen massive changes in our culture over the last 8 months to a year. And we're not just talking about the impacts of Me Too, we're talking about the impacts of beginning to understand the differences in gender diversity, they understand the differences in gender identification, the differences in sexual orientation differences, religious differences, and the good old talk that used to be okay in organizations is now needing a refresh, needing to be adjusted in many, many, many businesses. And in some ways, we're going to see that pendulum swing, and it's going to be unfair, and it's going to be difficult to manage. And we're going to have leaders who are really great leaders, and they flip up and say something they've said for 20 years, and now you're going to have a lawsuit. So I think that there has to be a culture shift that looks like towards the positivity, towards cultivating a healthier culture, so that when those things happen, it can be addressed in a way that says, oh, you know what, you're right. We live in a different world. Let me re-educate myself and adjust. And there's forgiveness in place. And I don't think many organizations are prepared to manage that, so that the new generations that are coming into the workplace, who are even more sensitive to this, who are even more intolerant of biases, they are more conscious of their own unconscious biases, so to speak, as well as others. And I think organizations that are cultivating leaders who get diversity, equity, inclusion, gender differences, and unconscious biases are going to be able to lead them where they need to in order to be effective, retain employees, cultivate that positive workforce, and avoid and mitigate their lawsuits and disruptions accordingly.
I knew she would nail it. So what I really want to sum up this section with are just some of the quote, it matters things to think about. So diversity, equity, and inclusion matters when you're really trying to see things from other people's perspectives. As Anissa said, we all have biases, unconscious, conscious, they're there, right? And so being able to shift your perspective and see things from other people's perspective really matters. So having that understanding of the DEI principles is going to help you be able to do that. When you're creating systems and processes, we want you to be thinking through what are the elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion that I need to think through when I am looking at my systems and processes. When you're thinking about people being seen and heard, which is one of the most important things to employees or people in general, thinking through what are the elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion that can be coming up when I want to make sure my people know that I have a relationship with them that is one of active inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion impacts your innovative culture, your problem solving, your ability to thrive and progress. And you're going to benefit when you think through diversity, equity, and inclusion through that. So in the sense, wrapping up, it impacts your bottom line. The Ford Foundation, if you go to their website, they have some incredible graphs and information that's available to read about what they're doing to increase their diversity, all of their efforts. I had a blast just kind of flipping through some of the things that they're doing. So I highly encourage you to go to fordfoundation.org just to look at what they're doing. So that's pretty much it for diversity. But again, I'm going to redirect you back to the Turnkey website to see a little bit more of that. So dimension number 9 has to do with employee development and retention. We all know the challenges of turnover and attrition. And so thinking about what is it that we can actually do to develop our employees and retain them. The statistic always thrown around is, 65% of employees leave because of their managers. So what can we do to develop our managers so that that's not the case in our organization? What are the tools that we can use to look for what is it that employees want in terms of engagement? I love using the questions from the Gallup Q12 survey to see what is it that employees globally are looking for in terms of their employment. And that again it's developed by the Gallup Inc. organization. And if you go to the Gallup website or even just Google Gallup Q12, you'll see these 12 questions that can help you learn a lot about employee engagement. And if you focus your attention on those 12 survey questions and whether or not you're providing positive answers to those survey questions, you're going to increase your engagement and reduce your attrition. And the third thing that we really know, and you're going to see this on that Gallup Q12, is that employees want learning and growth. So what are the things that you can do regardless of the type of organization that you're in, regardless of the budget that you may have? Think outside of the box in terms of learning and growth opportunities. So they can be technical, they can be personal development, they can be things that relate to improving their skills on their job or helping them get to the next level. But those are the types of things that employees, are looking for. They're wanting coaching and mentoring so that they can grow. They are wanting acknowledgement and recognition, and making sure that you know the difference between acknowledgement and recognition and praise. Because you don't always have to be saying, great job for doing your job. You can just simply acknowledge or recognize that you're grateful that someone is there performing their job. And people want to feel seen and heard, and that kind of recognition and acknowledgement is what helps them feel seen and heard. Feedback, that's another one. Employees want to know how they're doing. So providing the kind of feedback, but also seeking their feedback, getting their opinions, helping them feel like their opinions matter. Again, you're going to see that on the Gallup Q12. People want to feel that their thoughts and opinions matter. Having progressive performance management systems, something that's more than just a once a year review. What are the things that we can do in our performance management systems that help people get more feedback, to have the acknowledgement and recognition, to learn about the gaps that they have so that they can learn and grow? What are the things that you're doing formally and informally within your performance management system that helps people feel like they are in a situation where they have the opportunity to advance? And lastly, I would say giving people a sense of meaning and purpose. Sometimes that is as simple as building on their strengths, and sometimes that has to do with laddering up what they do every day to your mission and vision. But giving people a sense of meaning and purpose increases their happiness, and from happiness, we know success follows. So at a baseline, everybody wants fair compensation and incentives, but above that, it's the other things that I talked about that really make a difference in terms of employee development and retention. Excuse me, I apologize. I have a cold. So again, I want to repeat that coaching, again, whether it's formal or informal, whether you're doing it as a leader, your managers are pulling that through the organization, coaching is something that is an opportunity to really help your employees learn and grow. So I highly recommend thinking through a formal coaching program, and if that's not something that you can afford, a one-time training where an organization like Turnkey comes in and teaches you how to coach your organization. It's highly valuable. So the last dimension has to do with your own personal development. And in order to be a really strong leader, you need to be committed to doing the inner work that it takes to remove those blind spots we talked about earlier, and really grow in your emotional intelligence, your resilience, and your executive presence. And it's one of the most effective ways to do that is through coaching. And again, through that feedback process where you're seeking it out from your mentors, your colleagues, the people that work for you. Those are the things that we are looking for in order to help us grow. If we don't know how we're being perceived, then we can't possibly change and improve. Knowing that whatever style you're developing now and whatever skills you may have, knowing that, again, resiliency is going to come up, and the ability to adapt and bounce back as the environment changes is key. And I always say that as a leader, being able to coach and mentor yourself is going to feed the funnel of your succession planning. It's going to allow the people under you to grow into roles that you need filled, maybe even your own role, but also give them an opportunity to grow out of your organization, which ends up improving your reputation outside of the business and can bring you new employees that are excited and fresh to come into the organization. So thinking through, what does personal development look like? Are you consuming tons of content that is going to help you learn about leadership? And are you doing it in print, articles, books, podcasts, videos? Are you coming to these types of webinars where you are learning all of these new social science backed skills that can really help you hone your leadership. Are there any questions about the specific dimensions? I know we only had time to go through numbers 6 through 10, but I'm just curious if there are any questions about 1 through 5 that we didn't talk about today that you would like a refresher on, or any particular takeaways that you have from today.
That's what I'd also like to hear are the takeaways. Many of the things that you're sharing are things that we read in books and that we've gathered from being in the employee development or the HR space, and yet having it as the 10 dimensions. I see this as not a checklist, grow these things and you'll be a great leader, more as an iterative process. I learn a little bit about how to become a greater influencer, or how to grow my executive presence, or how to develop my emotional intelligence. And then in a year, or in my case, 2 days later, I'm hit in the face with, oh my gosh, I thought I was so much, I thought I was over that part of my emotional issue, right? Whatever it is. And then I have to look at it again. What can I continue to improve? In your development programs that you bring forth for clients, how do you set them up to continue the learning after you're gone, after they've read the book, after they've attended the seminar, or even done the coaching? What do organizations need to do to consider this an iterative process, something that we go through over and over again in order to transform?
I think that it's key to keep a record. When you start a program like this, start taking notes, start using a journal, start keeping track of the things that you're reading. I think that using an assessment up front is really critical in terms of getting that reputation piece set so that you know where you're starting. And I think if you're not going to continue consistently with the coaching, with a formal coaching and growth program, that you may come in and out of it, that continuing to do probably annual assessments, or depending on where you are, maybe a little less frequent, but continue to get that feedback that's formal and in writing so that you can read about it. Continuing to grow, continuing to ask for that kind of feedback, I think is key to continuing that growth. But I honestly believe, and I think the greatest leaders in the world will tell you, that coaching, and they didn't get where they are alone, and they continue to use coaching. And that is why, just like great athletes continue to use coaches, why great leaders continue to use coaches.
Well, and on that note, I think that, of course, we are service providers, and we are experts in coaching, and we would love to have the opportunity to support the folks on the call in your organization. But I also want to say that there is a way to support your leaders and become in adopting a coach approach to leadership. I will also say that I have seen many coach approach to leadership initiatives fail. The idea that someone can become a great coach simply by learning how to ask good questions in the middle of a quarterly earnings push, or a quarterly sales push, or right before a board meeting, or all the other things that are stressors in our day-to-day existence at work is very challenging. And I've seen HR folks attempt to implement a leader as coach program, and it falls short because there's not sufficient practice in the skills. There's concepts learned, there's theory discussed, but then the practice of coaching is what's critical to cultivating a coaching culture. When you are working with executives and you are helping them take on a more coach approach, what would you say are maybe the top 1 or 2 skill sets that someone who wants to become more coach-like or use a coach style, what would they do differently, or what are those 2 skills that you would recommend they develop?
Ooh, I love that question. That may be my favorite question of the week. The first one I'm going to steal from Mike Abershoff, who coined the term listening aggressively, or listening for understanding as opposed to listening to be understood. So a great coach is an amazing listener, and they make the people that are talking to them know it. So that's the first one, listening aggressively, or listening to understand as opposed to being understood. And then the second one is probably going to be remaining incredibly curious during that process. I had the other one. It just came out of my head. Oh, no, I was so excited by the question. It was listening aggressively
I
and
love that term, by the way, listening aggressively. I've heard of listening. I've heard of active listening, but now you just turned it upside down on its head. No, no, we're really talking about listening between the lines, listening to what's not said, watching body
oh,
language.
I got it.
Good. Glad I could
Sorry,
help.
I'm interrupting
Nope,
because I remembered.
that was my intention.
Because you are listening so aggressively, you become incredibly adept at finding the theme of what others are saying. Because, as coaches, we often believe the answer is within you. And if you are able to really listen aggressively, you can begin to hear the theme that the person you are listening to is really trying to communicate. And often it is a common theme for them. And as you start to identify what that is and help them see that, they become their own best problem solver. And that is what a coach is. They listen, they find the theme, and they lead you to your own best answer. That's the difference between a coach and a mentor, the difference between a consultant and a champion and a coach. We are here to guide you to your best answer, because your authentic answer is going to make you the best, most positive leader.
And that is exactly what a coach approach to leadership is. Leaders, there are such a thing as leading in the situation, which is why situational leadership and the 1-minute manager is still a fantastic style and skill set to learn as leaders. And yet, really effective leaders help their employees find their own answers and their own methodologies and their own opportunities for growth. And that's how organizations create a team environment where all players are driving towards the same goal in the same direction. But it's easier said than done. But through a coach approach to leadership, I think that that's possible. And yet not necessarily an easy task to accomplish. So I know we are coming up on the end of our time together. I do want to invite you on the call to reach out. If we may offer you a fast pass positive leadership strategy session, there's absolutely no obligation. I've had a number of folks take me up on this, and they tell me that it was one of the most valuable uses of an hour that they had. Our goal with the Fast Pass is what can your organization do to create, build, and develop a people-focused leadership approach? How can your organization develop a coaching-centered leadership approach where you have leader coaches, or how to build high-performing teams within your organization? And in this 60 minutes, I don't try to sell you anything. That's not what this is about. This is my way of contributing back, my way of, ideally, when you do have a need, you'll reach out to us because you'll know we're the expert. But more than anything, I just love talking shop. And if I can support you in developing a leadership program or resolving an employee development issue, it would be my honor to support you in that way. Give us a call. So now that we're coming to the end, if you do have any other questions, please do reach out. Also for feedback, we'd love to hear your thoughts about today, as well as what would you like to see in a future webinar. And if you would like to get in touch with Kimberly, reach out to 281-469-4244. We will put you in touch with Kimberly, and our contact details are right here on the screen here as well. And in a couple of days, Eileen, our webinar administrator extraordinaire, will be providing the download link and materials if you'd like to listen to the audio. I'm always open to your feedback. What can we do to improve and make your time with us really valuable? So Kimberly, two things. One, bravo. Thank you so much. This was awesome. I learned a lot as well. And what's one takeaway that folks can take away from you today as your final statement of building resiliency through cultivating positive leadership?
Leadership and growing in your leadership is a journey.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It takes a lot of work. Change is incredibly hard. And so start today and know that you're starting a journey just like any other growth program. And you're going to make mistakes on the way. I am steeped in leadership every single day. I still call my mentor.
Yeah.
I almost always know what he's going to say because he follows the 10 dimensions in a sort of organic way. But it is hard, even if I know the answer that he's going to tell me. Making great leadership choices is sometimes really challenging. And so the more you learn, the more you practice, um, the better it is. But just keeping in mind that it is a journey and no one expects you to be perfect right away, that you can grow with the support of people around you, other great leaders, all kinds of resources. But at the end of the day, it is a journey. We're going to learn and grow until hopefully we're underground and things are growing over us. So
Great. Great.
it's a journey.
Very good. Thank you very much, Kimberly, and thank you very much to my turnkey team for making this possible. And thank you very much for joining us over this hour. Do reach out if we may be of service. Have a fantastic week.
Great. Thank you.